My daughter banned me from the $150,000 Paris wedding I paid for just because I do not speak French. She emailed me saying, "Your presence will embarrass me in front of my French in-laws." I decided to teach her a lesson. The next morning, I woke up to 23 missed calls. If you have ever been treated like a walking wallet by your own family, hit that like button and subscribe. My name is Harrison Cole. I am 73 years old, and I have lived in Chicago my entire life. I am not a fancy man. My hands are rough like sandpaper from 50 years of pouring concrete and framing houses in the freezing Illinois winters. I built my construction business from nothing. I started as a laborer mixing mortar until my back felt like it was breaking and I ended up owning the company. I worked 18-hour days, so my daughter Madison never had to lift anything heavier than a textbook. It was 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. My apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that rings in your ears when you live alone. On my dining table sat a battered leather suitcase I had bought 20 years ago. Next to it was a first-class ticket to Paris for a flight leaving at 10:00 in the morning. I was supposed to be excited. My little girl was getting married in a castle in France. A real castle. The Château de Villers. I had seen the pictures. It looked like something out of a fairy tale movie. It should have been the proudest moment of my life. I was folding my best suit, the charcoal gray one I bought specifically for this trip, when my phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up the dark room. It was an email from Madison. The subject line made my stomach drop. It just said, "Do not come urgent." My hands were shaking a little as I picked up the phone. I thought maybe there was an emergency. Maybe the wedding was off. Maybe she was hurt. But as I read the words, the air left my lungs. It was not an accident. It was an execution. The email read, "Dad, please do not get on the plane." I've been thinking about this all night, and I have to be honest for the sake of my future. Your presence in Paris will be a disaster. Jean-Luc comes from a very old and prestigious family. They are aristocrats, Dad. They speak French and discuss art and philosophy. You do not speak French. You eat with your elbows on the table. You tell loud stories about construction sites. You will embarrass me. I sat down heavily on the wooden chair. I read the next line, and it felt like a physical punch to the chest. She wrote, "I have already told Jean-Luc and his parents that you had a sudden heart complication and cannot fly. It is better this way. Please do not ruin this for me. I need you to understand that this is about my image. Oh, and one more thing. Oh, and the florist just emailed me saying, the final installment of $50,000 is due tomorrow morning. Please transfer it before you go to the doctor. I love you." I stared at the phone until the screen went black. I did not cry. Men like me, we do not cry when we get hit. We go numb. We assess the damage. I looked at the checkbook sitting on the counter. Just last week, I had signed a check for $150,000. To make that happen, I had to sell a piece of land in the suburbs that I had been holding onto for 20 years. That land was my retirement cushion. It was my safety net. But Madison had said she needed a fairy tale. She said Jean-Luc was a count or a duke or some kind of royalty, and they had to maintain a certain standard. She said, "Dad, it is a once-in-a-lifetime event." So I sold the land, I wired the money, I looked around my apartment. It is a modest place, 2 bedrooms, old furniture. I drive a Ford truck that is 10 years old. I have never bought myself a luxury car. I have never bought designer clothes. Every extra dollar I ever made went into Madison. Private schools, ballet lessons, summer camps in Europe, university tuition that cost more than my first house. I wanted her to have the world I never had. And apparently, I succeeded. I gave her a world where I no longer fit in. I sat there in the dark for a long time. I remembered the day she was born. I remembered holding her in the hospital parking lot, promising her that I would always take care of her. I remembered her high school graduation when she looked at my work boots and asked me to wait in the car so her friends would not see me. I should have seen the signs then. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. It was 10:00 in the morning in Paris. She should be awake. She answered on the second ring. In the background, I could hear clinking glasses and loud laughter. There was classical music playing. "Hi, Dad," she said. Her voice was breezy and light. "Did you get my email?" "Yes, I got it," I said. My voice sounded raspy. "Okay, good," she said. "Look, I know you are probably a little hurt, but you have to be realistic. Jean-Luc's mother is a countess. She is very particular. If you were there stumbling around trying to order food in English, it would just be awkward for everyone. This way is better. You can rest and take care of your heart." "My heart is fine, Madison," I said. "It is a metaphor, Dad." She sighed. "It is a white lie to save face. Everyone wins. You stay comfortable in Chicago, and I get my perfect day." "Did you send the $50,000 for the flowers yet? The florist is being really annoying about it." I heard a male voice in the background. It was Jean-Luc. He was speaking English, but with that thick accent I had only heard once on a video call. "Tell the old man to hurry up," he shouted. "The champagne vendor is here too." Madison laughed. "You hear that, Dad? We are under pressure here. Just wire the money and we will FaceTime you during the ceremony." "Okay." She did not even ask how I was feeling. She did not apologize. She just wanted to make sure the check cleared. I realized then that I was not her father. I was not a person to her. I was a resource. I was an ATM machine that breathed. I looked at the photo of my wife, Catherine, on the mantle. She passed away 10 years ago. She was the soft one. She always told me I was too hard on the crews at work, but too soft on Madison. She used to say, "Harrison, you are teaching her that money grows on trees." I looked at Catherine's smiling face and I whispered, "I am sorry, honey, but our little girl is broken." I took a deep breath. The kind of breath you take before you lift a heavy beam. "Okay, Madison," I said. "I understand." "Really?" She sounded relieved. "Oh, thank you, Daddy. You are the best. I knew you would understand. It is just business." "Really, it is about branding?" "Yes," I said. "It is just business. I will not embarrass you anymore." I hung up the phone. I stood up and walked to the table. I picked up the first-class ticket to Paris. It cost me $4,000 non-refundable. I ripped it in half. Then I ripped it again and again until it was just confetti on my floor. I looked at the clock. It was 4 in the morning. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through my contacts until I found Sarah Jenkins. Sarah has been my lawyer for 30 years. She is a shark. She handled every contract dispute I ever had in the construction business. She knows where every skeleton is buried and she knows how to use a shovel. I pressed call. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Harrison, it is 4:00 in the morning. Is the building on fire?" "No, Sarah," I said. "But I need you to wake up. We have work to do." "What kind of work?" she asked. "I need to cancel some contracts," I said. "Harrison, what are you talking about? The wedding?" I said I want to cancel the wedding. There was a silence on the other line. Then I heard the rustling of sheets and the sound of a lamp clicking on. "Talk to me, Harrison," she said. Her voice was sharp now. I told her everything. I told her about the email, the heart condition, the request for $50,000 more for flowers while banning me from the event. When I finished, Sarah was silent for a moment. "That ungrateful little witch," she whispered. "Sarah," I said, "I need to know my options. I paid for everything. The venue, the catering, the dress, the band. All of the contracts are in my name, right?" Yes, she said, I reviewed them myself. You insisted on handling the vendors directly. So Madison would not go over budget. You are the sole signatory on the vendor agreements. And what are the cancellation policies? I asked. Most of them have a 48-hour clause, she said. You lose the deposit, which is usually 20 or 30%. But you are not liable for the remaining balance if you cancel before the 48-hour mark. The wedding is in 3 days. I said, then we are within the window. She said, Harrison, are you sure about this? This is the nuclear option. If we pull the plug now, there is no going back. The venue will lock the doors. The caterers will pack up. It will be chaos. I looked around my empty apartment. I thought about the 50 years of sweat and back pain. I thought about the disrespect in Jean-Luc's voice calling me the old man. I thought about Madison being ashamed of the hands that paid for her lifestyle. Do it, I said. Cancel everything, Sarah. The castle, the food, the music, the dress. If she wants a wedding, she can pay for it herself. Consider it done, she said. I am firing up my laptop right now. Harrison, go make yourself a coffee. This is going to be a long morning. I walked into my kitchen and started the coffee pot. The smell of dark roast filled the small room. I sat by the window and watched the sun start to rise over the Chicago skyline. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt, it wasn't sadness, it was relief. For the first time in 28 years, I was done being the wallet. I took a sip of coffee and checked my email on my phone. Sarah was fast. I saw the carbon copy emails hitting my inbox one by one. To Chateau de Vlay notice of cancellation of services regarding the Cole wedding. To El Grand Catering, Paris notice of contract termination effective immediately. To Vera Wang Paris, cancellation of custom order. To the Royal Symphony Orchestra, cancellation of booking. I watched the emails go out. Each one was a bomb dropping on my daughter's perfect, aristocratic fantasy. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank app. The Chateau had processed the cancellation. They kept the $20 deposit, but the $60 hold for the final payment was released back to my account. Then the catering company, $45,000 released. Then the dress, $25,000 released. In the span of 30 minutes, I had recovered over $100,000. But I knew the money wasn't the point. The point was what was happening in Paris right now. It was midday there, lunchtime. Madison and her in-laws were probably sitting down for a tasting menu or touring the grounds of the castle. I imagined the moment the venue manager would walk up to their table. I imagined the polite but firm French accent telling them that the credit card on file had been removed and the contract voided. I imagined the look on Jean-Luc's face when he realized the gravy train had just derailed. I poured myself a second cup of coffee. My phone sat on the table. The screen was black and silent, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The storm was coming, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to try to shelter Madison from the rain. I was going to let her get wet. I leaned back in my chair. Let them call. I whispered to the empty room. I am not a diplomat. I am a builder. And today I am tearing it all down. Sarah's voice on the other end of the line shifted instantly. One moment she was groggy with sleep, and the next she was the sharp attorney who had saved my business from bankruptcy back in '98. I could hear the rustling of covers and then the distinct click of a bedside lamp. She did not try to talk me out of it. Sarah knew me too well. She knew that once I made up my mind about a job, the concrete was already poured, and there was no going back. She asked me if I had the binder with the vendor agreements. I told her it was right in front of me on the kitchen table. I opened the thick leather folder. It was heavy. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds, but I knew that was just the weight of the money inside it. Every page represented thousands of dollars. Every signature at the bottom was mine. Harrison Cole, not Madison, not Jean-Luc me. Sarah told me to open my laptop and log into my email. She said she was logging into the secure portal she used for high-stakes contract disputes. She explained the legal standing clearly, because I was the sole financier and the signatory on every single document. I held the power of the purse. The contracts were standard service agreements. They all had a cancellation clause. It was the 48-hour rule. If the client cancels more than 48 hours before the event, the vendor keeps the non-refundable deposit but is legally obligated to release the hold on the remaining balance. It was Tuesday morning in Chicago. The wedding was Saturday evening in Paris. We were well within the safety zone. We had time, but not much. I pulled up the first contract, the Chateau de Vlate, the venue. It was a $60,000 rental fee for the weekend. $60,000 for a building that was just stone and mortar like any other building I had ever constructed. But this one had history. It had prestige. It was the stage Madison needed for her performance as a future aristocrat. I looked at the clauses. The deposit was $12,000. That money was gone the moment I signed the paper 6 months ago. I accepted that loss. It was the cost of tuition for the lesson I was about to teach. But the remaining $48,000 was currently sitting as a pre-authorization on my American Express Black Card. It was scheduled to post as a final charge in exactly 3 hours. Sarah told me to draft the email. She dictated the legal language. I typed it out with my 2 index fingers the way I always typed. Formal notice of cancellation, effective immediately. Reference contract number 7429. I hovered my finger over the send button. Clears throat. For a second, my mind drifted back to a dinner 6 months ago. It was the only time I had met Jean-Luc in person. Madison had brought him to Chicago to meet me. We went to a steakhouse downtown. I was wearing my work boots because I had come straight from a site inspection. They were Red Wings, good leather, expensive, but they were covered in a fine layer of dust. I remember Jean-Luc looking under the table. He nudged Madison and whispered something in French. Then he looked at me and switched to English. He said, "Mr. Cole in France." We have a saying you can tell a man's worth by his shoes. It is a pity you do not invest in better quality. He laughed a small, superior laugh. Madison laughed with him. She said, "Oh, Jean-Luc, Dad is just practical. He does not understand fashion." I did not say anything then. I paid for the $300 dinner. I tipped the waiter 20%. I walked to my truck in my dusty boots. Now sitting in my kitchen, those dusty boots were resting on the rung of my chair. The same boots that had paid for the chateau he wanted to get married in. I pressed send. The email whooshed away. The first domino had fallen. Sarah told me to move to the next one. El Rand Catering. This was the big one in terms of logistics. $45,000 for food and wine. They had ordered vintage champagne. They had requested truffles flown in from Italy. It was obscene. I eat meatloaf on Tuesdays. I make a pot of chili on Sundays that lasts me half the week. The idea of spending $45,000 on a single meal made my stomach turn even when I signed the check. But I did it because Madison said it was essential. I typed the second email. Sarah reminded me to attach the copy of the contract highlighting the cancellation paragraph. She was thorough. She wanted to make sure they had no wiggle room to claim breach of contract. We were following their rules, we were just using them against them. As I typed the catering cancellation, I thought about the email Madison sent me 3 hours ago. She was worried I would embarrass her with my table manners. She was worried I would use the wrong fork or chew too loudly. She wanted me to be invisible. Well, I was about to make the food invisible too. I sent the email. Another $45,000 saved. Another blow to the perfect image she was trying to curate. The last one was the hardest. Vera Wang Paris. The dress. $25,000 for a custom gown. I remember when Madison was 5 years old. I bought her a dress for Easter. It was pink with little white flowers. It cost me $40 at a department store. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. She twirled around the living room and told me she felt like a princess. I remember lifting her up and telling her she was my princess. That little girl was gone. She had been replaced by a woman who would lie about her father's health to keep him away from her wedding. A woman who cared more about the label on her dress than the man who paid for it. I hesitated on this one. Canceling the venue and the food was business. Canceling the dress felt personal. It felt like I was stripping her of her armor. Sarah's voice came through the phone, soft but firm. "Harrison, are you still there?" "I am here, Sarah," I said. "Do you want to skip the dress?" she asked. "We can leave that one." I looked at the empty chair across from me where Catherine used to sit. Catherine would have been heartbroken by all of this. But Catherine also hated lies. She hated pretense. She raised Madison to be better than this. If I let Madison get away with this, I would be failing Catherine too. No, I said cancel it. Cancel it all. I typed the final email. Cancellation of custom order. Authorization revoked. I pressed send. It was done. I sat back in my chair. The adrenaline that had been fueling me for the last hour started to fade, replaced by a cold, hollow feeling. I had just detonated a bomb in the middle of my daughter's life. I knew exactly what the blast radius would look like. Sarah told me she would handle any legal pushback from the vendors. She said she would draft a cease and desist letter if they tried to contact me directly. She told me to turn off my phone notifications and try to get some sleep. I thanked her and hung up, but I did not turn off my phone. I placed it face up on the table next to my coffee mug. I watched the screen. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then the first notification appeared. It was an automated reply from the chateau. "We have received your request for cancellation." It said, "Per our policy, the credit card on file has been removed from the reservation. Your booking has been voided. Please allow 10 to 15 business days for the release of funds." Then the second one, the catering company. Contract terminated. Then the third, the dress shop. Order canceled. It was real now. The systems were updating across the ocean. Computers were processing the data. In Paris, credit card terminals were flashing declined. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold now, but I drank it anyway. The bitterness matched the taste in my mouth. I imagined Jean-Luc in his expensive Italian shoes, walking up to the reception desk at the chateau. I imagined him trying to order a bottle of wine to celebrate. I imagined the confusion on his face when the concierge told him there was no account to charge it to. I imagined Madison waking up in her hotel suite. She was probably reaching for her phone expecting a transfer confirmation for the flowers. Instead, she was going to find a void. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't an email, it was a notification from my bank app. Credit card ending in 4092 has been locked by user request. I had done that part myself, right before I called Sarah. I froze the card. Even if they tried to force a charge through, it would bounce. I had cut the line, the safety net was gone. I looked out the window. The sun was fully up now over Lake Michigan. The city was waking up. People were going to work. Construction crews were pouring concrete. Life was going on. But in Paris, my daughter's world was collapsing. I did not feel happy. I did not feel triumphant. I felt like a man who had just amputated his own arm to stop an infection from spreading. It hurt. It hurt like hell, but I knew it was necessary to survive. I poured another cup of coffee and waited. The silence in the apartment was heavy. It was the calm before the storm. I knew that in a matter of minutes, that phone was going to start screaming. I knew the insults were coming, the tears, the rage. Let them come. I was Harrison Cole. I had weathered blizzards, recessions, and the death of my wife. I could weather the anger of a daughter who forgot where she came from. I took a deep breath and watched the phone. The screen lit up. Incoming call, Madison. I let it ring. I watched the phone vibrate against the wood of my kitchen table. It started as a low hum, a single buzz that I could have ignored. But then it came again and again. Within seconds, the phone was not just buzzing. It was dancing across the surface like a jackhammer trying to break through concrete. The screen lit up the dark kitchen with a strobe light effect flashing name after name. Madison. Jean-Luc. Madison again. Unknown number. Madison. It was 2:00 in the morning in Chicago, which meant it was 8 in the morning in Paris. The city of light was waking up, and my daughter was waking up to a nightmare of my creation. I did not pick it up immediately. I sat there with my cold coffee watching the chaos I had unleashed. The silence of my apartment was gone, replaced by the aggressive mechanical vibration of 23 missed calls and 50 text messages piling up on the lock screen. It felt like I was watching a demolition countdown. I had pressed the button hours ago, and now the building was finally collapsing. I reached out and silenced the ringer, but I did not turn the phone off. I needed to see this. I needed to witness the fallout. I unlocked the screen and opened the messaging app. The timeline of the texts told a story better than any book I had ever read. It started with confusion. The first message from Madison came in at 1:15 in the morning, my time just as the business day was starting in France. Dad, there is a problem with the card on file for the flowers. It says declined. Please call the bank ASAP. 10 minutes later, another one. Dad, are you awake? The venue manager just called our room. He says there is a flag on the account. Call me now. Then the tone shifted. The denial phase was over, and the panic was setting in. Dad, why did I just get an email from Vera Wang saying my dress order is canceled? This is not funny. Pick up the phone. Then came the rage. What the hell are you doing? Harrison? That one was from Jean-Luc? He had never called me Harrison before. It was always Mr. Cole, or usually just him talking about me in the third person to Madison. Now he was addressing me directly, and he was angry. I scrolled down. The messages became a blur of desperation and threats. You are ruining my life. Everyone is laughing at us. If you do not fix this in the next 10 minutes, I will never speak to you again. You are a bitter, jealous old man. I hate you. I read every single one of them. Each word was a brick being removed from the wall that had separated me from the truth for so long. My daughter did not love me. She loved the lifestyle I provided. And now that the lifestyle was gone, the love had evaporated like water on hot pavement. I went to the voicemail tab. There were 12 messages. I pressed play on the first one from Madison. Dad. She was crying. Not the soft tears of a heartbroken bride, but the jagged, gasping sobs of a child who dropped her ice cream. Dad, please tell me this is a mistake. The hotel says we have to vacate the suite by noon because the payment for the week was retracted. They are going to kick us out. Jean-Luc's mother is furious. You have to fix this, please. I skipped to the next one. Jean-Luc, listen to me, old man. I do not know what kind of game you are playing, but you are messing with the wrong people. My family is powerful in this city. You will not humiliate us like this. Transfer the funds immediately, or you will regret it. I laughed a dry, rasping sound in the empty kitchen. Powerful people do not beg for money from retired contractors in Chicago. Powerful people pay their own bills. But it was the third voicemail that made me freeze. It was from a number I did not recognize, a French country code. I pressed play, expecting another rant from Madison, or maybe a polite but firm legal threat from a vendor. Instead, a woman's voice filled my kitchen. It was loud, shrill, and aggressive. You listen to me, you miserable antique. I stopped breathing. The voice was speaking English. Fluent, rapid-fire English with a hard edge to it. It sounded like a mix of New Jersey and South London. It was definitely not the voice of a French aristocrat who had spent her life in Ceylon sipping tea. "We had a deal," the voice screeched. "Your daughter said you were good for the money. She said you were a silent partner." Silent. "You do not get to pull the rug out from under us the week of the payout. We have debts to clear. And if this wedding does not happen, I am coming for you. Do you hear me? I am coming for you, you cheap bastard." The message ended with a violent click. I sat there staring at the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from a sudden sharp clarity. That was Madame Beaufort Jean-Luc's mother, the Countess. I replayed the message. "We have debts to clear. Pay out." Madison had told me explicitly that Madame Bouffe did not speak a word of English. She had told me that was why I could not sit at the head table. She said, "Dad, she only speaks French, and she is very traditional. You would not be able to communicate." But the woman on that recording spoke English better than half the guys I worked with on the construction sites, and she certainly did not sound like nobility. She sounded like a lone shark. She sounded like someone desperate. Why would a French countess be screaming about a payout and debts in an American accent? My gut twisted. I have been in the construction business for 50 years. You develop an instinct for structural instability. You know when a wall is load-bearing, and you know when a foundation is cracked even if it is covered in fresh paint. This foundation was not just cracked, it was rotten. I thought about the timeline. Madison met Jean-Luc a year ago during her study abroad program. She fell in love fast. She told me he was wealthy, titled, and sophisticated. She said his family owned estates in the south of France. But wealthy people do not panic when a vendor payment bounces. They put down another card. They make a call to their private banker. They do not leave screaming voicemails threatening an old man in Chicago at 8 in the morning. And they definitely do not lie about speaking English. I stood up and paced the small kitchen floor. My dusty work boots sat in the corner where I had left them. I realized then that this was not just about my daughter being ashamed of me. This was about isolation. They wanted me to stay in Chicago, not because I was embarrassing, but because I was a witness. If I went to Paris, I would see the truth. If I sat at a dinner table with Madame Bouffe, I would realize she was a fraud. They needed my money, but they could not afford my presence. Madison knew. She had to know. You do not marry someone without knowing their mother speaks English. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. My daughter was not just using me, she was conning me. She was conspiring with these strangers to siphon $150,000 out of my retirement fund to pay off their debts. The wedding was a front. I felt a cold anger settle over me. It was different from the hurt I felt earlier. This was the cold, hard resolve of a man who realizes someone is trying to steal his tools. I needed proof. I needed to know exactly who these people were before I made my next move. I could not just rely on a voicemail. I needed concrete. I needed steel. I grabbed my phone and opened my contacts. I scrolled past the construction suppliers and the subcontractors until I found a name I'd not used in 5 years. Pierre Dubois. Pierre was an old friend. We met 20 years ago when I was consulting on a hotel project in Lyon. He was the head of security for the development firm. Before that, he was French intelligence. Pierre could find a needle in a haystack and then tell you who made the needle and how much they paid for the steel. He was now running a private investigation firm in Paris. I checked the time, 8:30 in Paris. Pierre would be on his second espresso by now. I opened a new message window. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I did not want to involve an old friend in my family disgrace. It was shameful, but I needed eyes on the ground. I needed to know what I was dealing with. I typed the message. Pierre, it is Harrison Cole. I need a favor, a big one. I need a background check on a family in Lyon, the Beauforts, Jean-Luc and his mother. They claim to be aristocracy. I think they are frauds. Check for debts. Check for criminal records. Check everything. I am wiring $5,000 to your account as a retainer. I need answers immediately. I hit send, then I sent a second text. Also check my daughter Madison Cole. See if her name is attached to any of their financial documents. That last one hurt to type. Asking a private investigator to look into your own child is a line you never think you will cross. But Madison had crossed the line first when she lied about my heart condition to keep me away from the scene of the crime. I put the phone down. The notifications were still coming in. Madison was texting again. "Dad, please pick up." Mom would not want this. I stared at the screen. She was using Catherine against me now. That was her ace in the hole. She knew I had a soft spot for her mother's memory, but she was wrong. Catherine would not want this. Catherine would be the one tearing down the gates of that castle with her bare hands if she knew her daughter was involved in a scam. I did not reply. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The city was fully awake now. The noise of traffic was drifting up from below. I had triggered the explosion. Now the dust was settling, and I was starting to see the shape of the rubble. My phone buzzed with a reply from Pierre. "Harrison, it has been a long time. I am on it. Give me 2 hours. If they are who they say they are, I will tell you. If they are not, I will find out who they are hiding from." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. 2 hours. In 2 hours, I would know if my son-in-law was a count or a con man. I went back to the coffee pot. I poured the dregs into my mug and drank it black and bitter. I was not going back to sleep. I was going to war. 2 hours. Pierre said he needed 2 hours, and Pierre was a man who operated with the precision of a Swiss watch. I sat at my kitchen table in Chicago watching the second hand on the wall clock tick past the 12. It was now 4:30 in the morning. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand, but my mind was wired tight. The adrenaline of the cancellation had faded, leaving behind a cold dread. I was not afraid of Jean-Luc or his mother. I was afraid of what I was about to find out about my own flesh and blood. The laptop screen blinked. A secure file transfer from Pierre arrived in my inbox. No subject line, just a paperclip icon and a file size that suggested a lot of dirty laundry. I clicked download. The file opened, and the first thing I saw was a photograph. It was not a castle. It was not a manor. It was a peeling gray apartment complex on the outskirts of Lyon. There was laundry hanging from the balcony railing and a rusted Citroen parked in front. The address listed was the current residence of the Buford family. I scrolled down to the financial summary. It was a sea of red ink. The Beaufort family was not aristocracy. They were destitute. Madame Beaufort, the woman who had screamed at me on the voicemail claiming to be a countess, was actually Marie Beaufort, a former shift supervisor at a textile factory who had been laid off 5 years ago. She had a record for passing bad checks and 2 civil judgments against her for unpaid rent. Then there was the boy, Jean-Luc. Pierre had dug deep. Jean-Luc was 30 years old and listed as unemployed for the last 18 months. Before that, he was an insurance salesman in a cubicle farm. He had been fired for cause embezzlement. It was a small amount, just enough to get him terminated without a prison sentence, but enough to blacklist him from the industry. But the real smoking gun was the debt. Pierre had found records from a private credit agency in Monaco. Jean-Luc had a gambling problem, a big one. He owed $200,000 to a private lender, the kind of lender who does not send polite letters, but sends guys with baseball bats. I did the math in my head. The wedding budget was $150,000 plus the $50,000 Madison had demanded for flowers at the last minute. That was exactly $200,000. My stomach turned over. This was not a wedding. It was a heist. They were washing my retirement money through vendors to pay off a gambling debt before Jean-Luc got his legs broken. The urgency, the screaming, the panic, it all made sense now. They did not care about the flowers or the food. They needed the cash flow to stop the sharks from circling. But as bad as that was, it was the next section of the report that broke me. Pierre had included a folder labeled Madison Cole Background. I hesitated. Why would I need a background check on my own daughter? I raised her. I knew her. Or I thought I did. I clicked the folder. Inside were screenshots from social media profiles I had never seen before. Madison had blocked me on these accounts years ago. There were also scanned copies of documents she had submitted to French immigration and the wedding registry. I zoomed in on a wedding announcement posted on a high society French blog. It was a picture of Madison and Jean-Luc looking glamorous on a boat in the Seine. The caption read, Jean-Luc Bouffe, Count of Leon to wed Madison Cole heiress, and daughter of the late Harrison Cole, distinguished American diplomat. The late Harrison Cole. I sat back in my chair and let those words sink in. Deceased. She had killed me. I scrolled further. There were forum posts where she discussed her tragic backstory. She told people her father had died of a heart attack years ago, leaving her a massive trust fund. She claimed her mother was a socialite from New York. She erased 50 years of construction sites. She erased the concrete dust and the calluses. She erased the Ford truck and the small apartment. And she erased me. I realized then why she had banned me from the wedding. It was not because I did not speak French. It was not because I would use the wrong fork. It was because if I walked into that room breathing and talking with my rough Chicago accent and my builder hands, her entire house of cards would collapse. I was the evidence that she was a liar. My existence was the only thing standing between her and the fantasy life she had constructed. She had told them I was dead to elevate herself. She had turned me into a ghost so she could play the role of the grieving heiress. I looked at my hands resting on the table. They were shaking not from fear but from a rage so deep it felt cold. I had worked until my back gave out to give her this life. I had sacrificed my own comfort of my own retirement so she could have everything, and in return she had buried me before I was even cold. The phone rang. It was Pierre calling via an encrypted app. I picked up immediately, Harrison Pierre said. His voice was grave. Did you read the file I read it, Pierre? I said. My voice sounded hollow to my own ears. They are frauds, all of them. Yes, Pierre said. But Harrison, there is a situation developing right now that you need to know about. My contact at the chateau just alerted me. What is happening? I asked. Madison is at the venue, Pierre said. She is panicked. When your payments were retracted, the manager demanded immediate settlement, or they would call the police to evict them from the property. Let them kick her out, I said. She made her bed. Harrison, you do not understand. Pierre interrupted. She is trying to write a check. A personal check from a French bank account she opened last week. So what I asked the account is empty, Harrison. Pierre said she knows it is empty. In France, writing a bad check for this amount is not just a civil matter, it is fraud. If she hands that piece of paper to the manager and it bounces, she will be arrested. The police here do not play games with check sons provision. She is looking at prison time, Harrison. I closed my eyes. Prison. My daughter was standing in a castle in France, about to sign her life away, not to a husband, but to the French judicial system. She was so desperate to keep the lie alive, so desperate to maintain the facade in front of her fake aristocratic in-laws, that she was willing to commit a felony. She was willing to go to jail rather than admit the truth. And Jean-Luc, where is he? I asked. He is there. Pierre said he is pressuring her to sign. He needs that venue secured so he can try to leverage it for more loans. He is using her as a shield. Harrison. I looked at the clock. It was nearly 5 a.m. If I did nothing, Madison would be arrested within the hour. She would be humiliated publicly. She would have a criminal record. She would be ruined. Part of me, the part that had been hurt by her email and her lies wanted to let it happen. It would be justice. It would be the ultimate lesson. But I was still her father. Even if she said I was dead, even if she was ashamed of me, I was the man who taught her to ride a bike. I was the man who put Band-Aids on her scraped knees. I could not let her go to prison for a con man. But I was not going to save her either. Not in the way she wanted. I was not going to wire the money and let the wedding proceed. I was not going to let her marry a man who was using her to pay off gambling debts. I needed to stop the wedding. I needed to expose the truth. I needed to blow the whole thing up in person. Pierre, I said, can you buy me some time? How, Pierre asked. Call the venue manager, I said. You know him right. Tell him the funds are coming. Tell him there is a wire transfer delay from the States. Lie to him, Pierre. Just keep them from calling the police for 24 hours. Harrison, that is risky. Pierre warned. If the money does not show up, my reputation is on the line. I am coming, Pierre, I said. I am coming to Paris. You are coming to pay? Pierre asked, sounding confused. No, I said, I am coming to end this. I am going to walk into that rehearsal dinner and I am going to introduce myself. I am going to show them exactly who Harrison Cole is. I am going to show them the dead diplomat is very much alive. There was a silence on the line. Then I heard a small, dry chuckle from Pierre. I see, he said. You are going to burn it down. Yes, I said. I am going to burn it all down. I will make the call, Pierre said. Get on the plane, Harrison, and bring your tuxedo. If you are going to crash a party, you should dress for the occasion. I hung up the phone. I walked into my bedroom. I grabbed the suit I had folded earlier, the charcoal gray one. I threw it back in the suitcase. Then I went to the back of my closet. I pushed aside the flannel shirts and the work coats until I found a garment bag that had not been touched in 10 years. Inside was a tuxedo. It was a Bioni. I had bought it for a gala I attended with Catherine years ago when my business was at its peak. It was the only piece of truly expensive clothing I owned. I held it up. It still looked sharp. Madison wanted a diplomat. She wanted a distinguished father. Well, she was going to get one. I packed the tuxedo, I packed my dress shoes. I picked up my laptop and booked a new ticket. Economy class middle seat. I wasn't wasting another $4,000 on comfort. I was going to war and soldiers travel light. I looked at the picture of Catherine one last time. She is in trouble, Kate, I whispered. She is lost in a lie so big she can't see the way out. I have to go get her, but she is going to hate me when I do. I grabbed my suitcase and walked to the door. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Madison. Dad, please just send the money. I will pay you back. I promise. I deleted the message. There would be no more money. There would be no more lies. I walked out of my apartment and locked the door. The hallway was quiet. Chicago was sleeping. But in Paris, the clock was ticking down. I had 10 hours to get there. 10 hours to prepare myself to look my daughter in the eye and destroy her dreams to save her life. I got into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. The descent began. I stood at the chaotic check-in counter at O'Hare International Airport. The line for economy class snaked back and forth like a maze of misery. Families with screaming toddlers, exhausted business travelers, and tourists dragging oversized bags surrounded me. Usually when I traveled, especially for something as significant as my daughter's wedding, I flew first class. I had earned that comfort after 50 years of breaking my back. But today was different. Today I was not a father going to celebrate. I was a man going to work. And when you go to a job site, you do not take the limousine, you take the truck. I bought a one-way ticket to Charles de Gaulle. Economy, middle seat, row 42. The price was $800, a fraction of what I had spent on the original ticket I destroyed. That $4,000 was gone, but I considered it a small price to pay for the clarity I now had. I looked at the boarding pass in my hand. It felt thin and cheap. It felt appropriate. I found a quiet corner near the gate to wait. My phone was in my hand. I had turned the ringer back on. I knew she would call. She had to call. The venue manager in Paris would be putting pressure on her by now. Pierre had bought me time with his lie about the wire transfer delay, but Madison would be desperate for confirmation. And sure enough, 10 minutes before boarding, the phone buzzed. Madison. I took a breath. I let it ring twice. I needed to compose myself. I needed to find the voice of the Harrison Cole she thought she knew. The pushover, the wallet, the man who would do anything to stop his little girl from crying. I answered, "Hello, Madison, Dad." Her voice was breathless. It sounded like she had been running or crying or acting. "Dad, I am so sorry." She paused, waiting for me to jump in and comfort her. I stayed silent. "I really am." She continued, her voice dropping to that sweet pitch she used when she was 10 years old and wanted a pony. "I have been under so much stress. You have no idea. Jean-Luc's family is so demanding and the wedding planner is crazy." And I just snapped. "I did not mean those things I said in the email. Of course I want you there. You are my dad." I listened to the performance. It was good. If I did not know she had declared me dead on a French wedding registry, I might have believed her. "I understand stress, Madison," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Weddings are difficult." "Yes, exactly," she said, seizing on the opening. "And look, I have a solution. I know your heart condition makes it impossible to fly." The lie again. She was sticking to the script, even when apologizing. So Jean-Luc and I talked. She said, "We came up with a compromise. We're going to set up a special iPad right in the front row. We will have a Zoom link just for you. You can watch the whole ceremony live from your living room. It will be like you are right there with us, without the risk to your health." Zoom. She wanted me to watch the $150,000 event I paid for on a 10-in screen from $4,000 away. She wanted to mute me. She wanted my money in the room, but my face on a tablet, where she could turn me off if I looked too working ass. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive. "And Dad," she added quickly about the payments. "The vendors are really freaking out. Since we resolved this and you are going to be there virtually, could you please unfreeze the card or just wire the funds directly? We need to secure the catering for the rehearsal dinner tonight." I looked out the window at the gray tarmac. The plane was pulling up to the gate. It was a massive machine, a vessel capable of crossing oceans. I was about to get on it and fly into a storm she could not even imagine. Pierre had told me to buy time. He said, "Keep them calm until you get here." So I did something I had never done to my daughter. I lied to her face. "You are right, Madison," I said. "Zoom is a good compromise. It is safe." I could hear her exhale on the other end of the line. The relief was palpable. "Oh, thank God," she said. "Thank you, Dad. I knew you would be reasonable." "I am at the bank right now." I lied. "I am speaking with the manager to override the security hold on the transfers. It takes time because of the international amount, but I am signing the paperwork." "You are?" she asked. Her voice spiked with greed. "You are sending it all of it. Said the venue, the food, the flowers, everything you need. Just tell the manager the confirmation is coming. Tell them to hold the reservation." "I love you, Dad," she squealed. "You are saving my life. I will send you the Zoom link as soon as we set it up." "I love you too, honey," I said. And then I hung up. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. Lying to your child goes against every instinct a parent has. We are wired to protect them, to be truthful, to guide them. But I was not protecting her anymore. I was hunting a predator. And predators do not get the truth, they get bait. I had just baited the trap. She would tell Jean-Luc and his mother that the money was coming. They would relax. They would keep spending. They would dig the hole deeper, thinking I was filling it with cash. And when I arrived, I would kick the ladder away. They called my boarding group. Group 5, the last group. I walked down the jet bridge. The air was stale and smelled of jet fuel. I found my seat. It was tight. My knees pressed against the plastic back of the seat in front of me. The man next to me was already asleep, his elbow encroaching on my armrest. I did not care. I settled in and buckled the belt. As the plane taxied to the runway, I pulled out my phone one last time before switching to airplane mode. I opened the photo gallery. I had a folder named Madison. I scrolled back years back. There was a photo of her at 6 years old standing in the frame of a house I was building. She was wearing a plastic yellow hard hat that was too big for her slipping down over her eyes. She was holding a plastic hammer banging on a 2x4. I remembered that day. She had looked up at me with huge, adoring eyes and said, "Daddy, I am building a castle." I swiped. Her 16th birthday. I had bought her a used Honda Civic, not a new car, but a safe one. She had jumped into my arms screaming with joy. She did not care that it had 40,000 km on it. She just wanted to drive. I swiped again. Clears throat. Her college graduation. She was wearing the gown holding the diploma I paid for. I was standing next to her smiling so hard my face hurt. She was looking at the camera, but her body was angled slightly away from me. That was the beginning, I realized. That was when she started to drift. When she started to meet people who had summer homes in the Hamptons and fathers who worked in finance, not construction. I looked at the face of the young woman in the photos. I tried to find the moment when she decided I was not enough. Was it my clothes? Was it my hands? Was it the way I spoke? I had spent my life building foundations. I made sure the concrete was mixed, right? The rebar was tied tight. The footings were deep. I thought I'd done the same with her. I thought I had built a person with a strong moral foundation, a person who valued hard work and honesty. But somewhere along the line, the blueprints had changed. I had poured all my love and money into a structure that was hollow on the inside. The plane accelerated down the runway. The engines roared, pushing me back into the cramped seat. I closed my eyes. The conflict inside me was a physical pain. Part of me, the father part, wanted to turn the plane around. I wanted to call her back and say, "Stop. Run away from these people. Come home." I wanted to save her from the humiliation I was about to inflict. But the businessman in me, the man who had fired dishonest foremen and sued crooked suppliers, knew better. You do not fix a rotten beam by painting over it. You tear it out. If I saved her now, if I paid the debts and let the wedding happen, she would never learn. She would spend the rest of her life thinking she could lie and cheat and use people to get what she wanted. She would stay married to a gambler and a fraud. She would be trapped in a life of deception. Destroying this wedding was the only way to save her future. I put the phone away. I stared at the seat back in front of me. 8 hours to Paris. 8 hours to think about every mistake I had made as a father. I did not sleep. I watched the map on the screen slowly track our progress across the Atlantic. I drank water. I refused the meal. My stomach was in knots. As we crossed the coast of France, the sun began to set again. It was evening in Europe. The rehearsal dinner would be starting soon. Madison and Jean-Luc would be at the restaurant clinking glasses, toasting to their good fortune, believing the wire transfer was processing. They were celebrating a victory that did not exist. The pilot announced our descent into Charles de Gaulle. The plane banked, and I saw the lights of Paris sprawling out below. The city of lights. It looked beautiful from up here, peaceful. But down there in the streets, my family was a crime scene waiting to happen. The wheels touched the tarmac with a jolt. The reverse thrusters roared. We slowed down taxiing toward the terminal. Everyone around me stood up reaching for bags, checking watches, eager to start their vacations or get to their meetings. I stayed seated until the aisle cleared. I grabbed my bag. I walked off the plane. As I entered the terminal, the rush of foreign voices surrounded me. French, German, Spanish. I did not speak any of them. Madison was right about that. I was an outsider here, but the language of money was universal, and I spoke that fluently. I stopped near the baggage claim and turned my phone on. It buzzed instantly. A flood of notifications came through. More missed calls from Madison. More texts from Pierre updating me on the location of the dinner. But one notification stood out. It was a text message from my bank in Chicago. It was marked Urgent Fraud Alert. I opened it. The message read, "We have detected suspicious activity on your account. Multiple failed login attempts from an IP address in Paris, France. User attempted to reset password using your social security number. Access has been blocked." I stared at the screen. It was not a vendor trying to charge a card. It was a login attempt. Madison. She had my social security number. She knew my security questions. When the wire transfer did not arrive, she did not just wait. She tried to break into my account. She tried to hack her own father to steal the money she thought she was owed. She was not just desperate, she was criminal. That was the drop that made the cup overflow. That was the moment the last thread of guilt snapped. She had tried to rob me not metaphorically, literally. I looked up from the phone. My reflection stared back at me from the glass doors of the exit. I looked tired. I looked old. I looked like a man who had traveled 4,000 miles to find out his daughter was a thief. I put the phone in my pocket. I adjusted my jacket. I was Harrison Cole. I built skyscrapers. I built bridges. And tonight I was going to dismantle a wedding. I walked through the sliding doors and into the Paris night. Pierre was waiting, and the rehearsal dinner was just beginning. Pierre was waiting for me at a small cafe in the Montmartre district, away from the tourist traps and the prying eyes of the city center. It was a place where locals drank strong coffee and smoked cigarettes with an intensity that suggested they were trying to burn down the filter. I spotted him immediately. He looked older than I remembered, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, watchful, the kind of eyes that missed nothing and forgave even less. He was sitting at a corner table with a thick manila envelope resting next to his espresso. I sat down across from him. I did not order. My stomach was still churning from the flight and the fraud alert from my bank. Pierre did not waste time on pleasantries. He tapped the envelope with a manicured fingernail. "Harrison," he said, his voice low and growly, "you are not going to like this." "I did not come here to like things, Pierre," I said. "I came here for the truth. Give it to me." He slid the envelope across the zinc table. "It is worse than gambling debts." He said Jean-Luc is not just a degenerate gambler, he is a predator. But Harrison, he did not do this alone. I opened the envelope. The first document was a prospectus. It was a glossy brochure for an investment opportunity in a tech startup based in Lyon. It looked legitimate at first glance, but then I saw the names on the board of advisors. Listed right there in bold print was Harrison Cole, former U.S. Ambassador, Senior Diplomatic Advisor. I felt the blood drain from my face. "They used my name," I whispered. Pierre nodded. "They did not just use your name, they used your credit rating. They used your reputation." Madison and Jean-Luc have been soliciting investments from wealthy families in Lyon and Monaco. They have been selling shares in a company that does not exist, claiming that you are the silent backer. They told investors that your diplomatic status guaranteed the funds were tax-exempt and secure. I turned the page. There were lists of victims: a retired teacher who lost her pension, a small business owner who mortgaged his shop. Madison was the face of the operation. Pierre continued. "She played the part perfectly. The wealthy American is the daughter of the great diplomat. She charmed them, Harrison. She looked them in the eye and took their money, promising them returns that were impossible. She told them her father was too busy with international affairs to meet them, but that he sent his personal regards. I felt sick, physically sick. I had raised her to be honest. I had punished her when she stole a candy bar at age 5. I had lectured her on the importance of a handshake deal, and she had turned into a grifter. She is not just a liar, I said, my voice trembling. She is a criminal. Pierre nodded. And she is running out of time. The investors are getting restless. They were promised a payout after the wedding. They think the wedding is the merger event where the funds will be released. That is why the wedding has to happen. It is not about love. It is about buying time before the Ponzi scheme collapses. And the debts I asked, the gambling debts are real, Pierre said. Jean-Luc took the investment money and went to the casinos. He lost it all. $200,000 of other people's money. That is why they needed your $150,000. Not for the flowers, not for the venue, but to pay off the most dangerous of the investors before he goes to the police. I closed the folder. The weight of it felt like a slab of granite on the table. My daughter was not just embarrassed by me, she was terrified of me. Because if I showed up and told the truth that I was a contractor, not a diplomat, the investors would realize they had been conned. The police would be called. The house of cards would fall. Where are they now? I asked. Pierre checked his watch. Right now they are at Le Renvour. He said it is a historic restaurant near the Palais Royal. Very expensive, very exclusive. It is the location for the rehearsal dinner. I stood up. I am going there, I said. Pierre reached out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. Sit down, Harrison, he said. You cannot just storm in there. They have security. If you make a scene, they will throw you out and Madison will spin it. She will tell everyone you are the crazy, estranged relative she warned them about. She will use your anger against you to validate her lies. I sat back down. He was right. I needed leverage. I needed to be undeniable. How do we get in? I asked. Pierre smiled. It was a cold smile. A smile that reminded me why he was so good at his job. The owner of Le Renvour is my cousin Michel, he said. He called me an hour ago. He is very stressed. Why, I asked. Because the reservation for tonight is for 30 people, Pierre said. The bill is estimated at $20,000, and Madison has only paid a $5,000 deposit. The contract states the full balance must be paid before the first bottle of wine is opened. I remembered the text messages, the panic, the credit cards being declined. She does not have the money, I said. No, she does not. Pierre agreed. She gave Michel a check this morning, a check from that empty French bank account. Michel has not run it yet, but he suspects it is bad. He is holding the table, but he is nervous. He does not want to turn away a high-profile party, but he cannot afford to eat the cost. I reached into my jacket pocket. Before I left Chicago, I had stopped at my bank. I had withdrawn $15,000 in cash and converted another $10,000 into euros at the airport. I was walking around with enough cash to buy a small car. I pulled out a thick envelope of euros. Call your cousin, I said. Pierre raised an eyebrow. Tell him I am buying the debt, I said. Tell him I will pay the remaining $15,000 right now in cash. I will cover the entire cost of the rehearsal dinner. And what do you want in return? Pierre asked. I want a seat, I said. I want a seat at the head table. I want them to know that the dinner is paid for, but I want them to think it was a miracle. Do not tell them who paid, just tell them a benefactor covered it. Let them relax. Let them drink. Let them think they got away with it one more time. And then Pierre asked, and then I said I want control of the menu, and I want the microphone. Pierre laughed. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. He spoke rapidly in French. I caught the words American and cash and father. He hung up and looked at me. Michelle is expecting us, he said. He says if you pay the bill, you can serve them dog food for all he cares. He just wants his money. Let us go, said. We took Clear's Throat a taxi to the restaurant. It was not open for service yet. We went in through the back door through the kitchen. The air smelled of butter and roasting meat. It smelled like money. Michelle met us in his office. He was a short, round man with sweat on his forehead. He looked relieved to see Pierre and even more relieved when I placed the stack of euros on his desk. He counted it twice. His hands were shaking slightly. Monsieur Cole, he said, in heavily accented English, you're a savior. Your daughter, she is difficult. You have no idea. I said we made the arrangement. Michelle would tell Madison that the check had cleared. He would tell her that everything was perfect. He would seat the party. He would start the wine service. And then at 8 USO sharp, he would open the doors for me. I left the restaurant and checked into a hotel across the street. I did not want to be far. I walked into my room and threw my suitcase on the bed. I unzipped it. The charcoal suit was there, practical and sturdy, but underneath it in the garment bag lay the tuxedo. I took it out. The black fabric seemed to absorb the light in the room. It was silk and wool Italian. It cost more than my first car. I stripped off my flannel shirt and my jeans. I took a shower scrubbing the travel grit from my skin. I shaved carefully. I looked at my face in the mirror. The lines were deep. The eyes were tired, but the jaw was set. I put on the white dress shirt. I fastened the studs. I tied the bow tie. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. I stepped into the trousers and pulled on the jacket. It fit perfectly. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. The man staring back at me did not look like a contractor. He did not look like a man who mixed cement. He looked like power. He looked like money. He looked like a diplomat. Madison had spent years lying about who I was. She wanted a distinguished father. She wanted someone who commanded respect. She wanted a man who could stand in a room of aristocrats and not look out of place. Tonight I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. I was going to play the role she had written for me, but the script was mine. I checked my watch. 7:30. The guests would be arriving. Madison would be putting on her designer dress, thinking she had dodged a bullet. Jean-Luc would be laughing, drinking champagne paid for by a man he thought was a fool. They thought the silence from Chicago meant defeat. They thought I was sitting in my apartment crying over a broken heart. They had no idea I was across the street adjusting my cufflinks. I walked to the window and looked down at the entrance of the Grand Vour. I saw a limousine pull up. I saw Madison step out. She looked beautiful. She looked happy. She looked like a fraud. Jean-Luc stepped out after her, holding her hand, whispering something in her ear. They walked into the restaurant like they owned the city. Enjoy the appetizers, I whispered to the glass. I put my phone in my pocket. I grabbed the room key. I walked to the door. It was time to introduce myself. I am Harrison Cole, and tonight I am the ambassador of truth. Le Grand Vour is a place that smells of history and old money. The walls are lined with gilded mirrors and hand-painted frescoes. The velvet banquets are a deep, rich red. It is the kind of place where Napoleon Bonaparte used to dine. It is the kind of place where a concrete contractor from Chicago should feel small and out of place. But as I stood outside the heavy oak doors, checking my cufflinks one last time, I did not feel small. I felt like a wrecking ball, painted in gold leaf. Inside, the atmosphere was loud and celebratory. Through the crack in the door, I could see the long table set for 30. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the guests. They were a mix of Jean-Luc's family and the so-called investors that Pierre had told me about. They looked the part. Men in sharp suits, women in designer dresses. They were laughing, eating, drinking, with the voracious appetite of people who believe the bill is being covered by a ghost. My eyes found Madison immediately. She was sitting at the center of the table next to Jean-Luc. She looked radiant. Her hair was swept up in an intricate shiny, and she was wearing a white cocktail dress that probably cost more than my first work truck. She was holding a glass of red wine, swirling it theatrically. I watched as Michelle, the owner, poured another round from a dusty bottle labeled Chateau Margaux, 1982. The bottle was real, but the wine inside was a 10 euro table red from the corner store. Pierre had arranged that little detail. It was a test. A true aristocrat would have spit it out immediately. But Jean-Luc took a sip, closed his eyes, and nodded solemnly. "Exquisite," he said, his voice carrying over the chatter. "You can really taste the terroir." The notes of blackberry are unmistakable. The investors nodded in agreement, raising their glasses to toast the impeccable taste of the Beaufort family, frauds every single one of them. They were drinking vinegar and calling it nectar because they thought it was free. Madison stood up to make a toast. She tapped a silver spoon against her glass. The room went quiet. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, or perhaps with the adrenaline of the con. "And to my father, Harrison Cole, he could not be here tonight because his diplomatic duties in Washington are too demanding, but he sends his love and his generosity. On Monday, when the trust fund is officially released, we will all celebrate the merger of our families and our futures. Cheers." The table roared. Trust fund, diplomatic duties. She was digging the hole so deep she would never climb out. She was not just lying about me. She was selling shares in my imaginary fortune. I signaled to the doorman. He nodded and pushed the double doors open. They swung wide with a heavy, dramatic swoosh. I stepped into the room. I did not rush. I walked with the slow, measured pace of a man inspecting a job site, ensuring the structural integrity before signing off on the permit. The Brian tuxedo fit me like armor. The fabric moved with me, silent and expensive. I kept my chin up, my expression unreadable. I looked at no one and everyone at the same time. For a few seconds, nobody noticed. The noise of the toast was still dying down. But then the silence started to ripple outward from the door like a wave. Heads turned. Forks stopped midway to mouths. Madison was still standing, her glass raised. Her eyes swept over the room, smiling, until they landed on me. The glass slipped from her fingers. It hit the edge of the table and shattered. Red wine. And the cheap 10 swill exploded across the pristine white tablecloth like a gunshot wound. It splashed onto her white dress, staining the silk crimson. She did not move. She did not breathe. She stared at me as if she were seeing a corpse walking. Her face drained of all color, leaving her pale and ghostly under the chandelier light. Jean-Luc followed her gaze. He turned in his chair. When he saw me, his jaw went slack. The arrogant smile he had worn while tasting the wine vanished instantly, replaced by the raw, primal fear of a prey animal spotting a predator in the tall grass. I continued to walk. My dress shoes clicked rhythmically on the parquet floor. Click, click, click. A countdown. The room was deadly silent now. The only sound was the dripping of wine from the tablecloth onto the floor. I stopped 10 FT from the table. I stood tall, my hands clasped loosely behind my back. I let the silence stretch. I let them sweat in it. Madame Bouffe sat to the right of Jean-Luc. She was wearing a heavy necklace that looked like paste jewelry, trying too hard to be diamonds. She leaned in close to her son, her eyes narrowing as she inspected me. She did not recognize me. Why would she? I was the myth, the wallet. She whispered loudly in French, but the acoustics of the room carried her voice straight to me. Keodome. Who is this, the butler? It was perfect. She thought I was hired help. She thought I was there to serve them. In a way, she was right. I was there to serve them. I was there to serve them a reality check. I looked directly at her. I did not blink. Then I shifted my gaze to the investors, the retired teacher, the shop owner, the people Pierre had told me about. They looked confused, waiting for an introduction, waiting to see how this new character fit into the play. Finally, I looked at Madison. She was trembling. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. She looked like she wanted to faint to disappear into the floorboards. I took one more step forward. "Apologies for the delay," I said. My voice was deep, steady, and projected to the back of the room without shouting. It was the voice I used to command crews of 50 men over the noise of jackhammers. It was the voice of authority. Madison flinched as if I had struck her. I surveyed the table, the wasted food, the fake wine, the broken glass. "I am the one paying for this dinner," I said, letting the words hang in the air. I looked at Michel standing by the kitchen door and gave him a curt nod. He nodded back, confirming the transaction was complete. The debt was mine. The table was mine. I turned back to the frozen group. "May I sit?" It was a rhetorical question. I pulled out the empty chair at the head of the table, the one that had been left vacant for the ghost of Harrison Cole. Jean-Luc scrambled to his feet. He knocked his own chair over in his haste. It clattered loudly against the floor, breaking the spell of silence. "Mr. Cole," he stammered. His accent was thick, his composure shattered. "We thought the heart condition." "The doctors said miraculous recovery," I said, cutting him off. "Modern medicine is a wonderful thing, Jean-Luc, almost as wonderful as wire transfers." I sat down. I adjusted my cufflinks. I placed my hands on the table, palms down. Madame Beaufort looked from me to her son, then to Madison. She was trying to calculate the new dynamic, trying to figure out if I was a threat or a bigger payday. She smoothed her dress and forced a tight reptilian smile. "Ah," she said, switching to her accented English. "The famous father. We are so honored." Madison said, "You were indisposed." I looked at her. I saw the greed in her eyes. I saw the desperation masked by layers of makeup and attitude. "I was," I said, "but I decided that a wedding is a family affair, and I would not miss the opportunity to meet the aristocracy my daughter has joined." I emphasized the word aristocracy. I let it drip with sarcasm, but subtle enough that she could choose to ignore it if she wanted. Madison slowly sat back down. She grabbed a napkin and started dabbing frantically at the wine stain on her dress. It was futile. The stain was setting. It was permanent, just like what was about to happen. She leaned toward me. She smelled of expensive perfume and fear. She lowered her voice to a desperate whisper, a sound meant only for me. "Dad, please," she hissed. Her eyes were wide, pleading, terrified. "Do not say anything, please. I will explain everything later. I will do whatever you want. Just do not ruin this. Not in front of them. Please, Dad, play the part." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the little girl in the plastic hard hat. I saw the teenager in the Honda Civic. And I saw the woman who had tried to hack my bank account 4 hours ago. She wanted me to play the part. She wanted the diplomat. She wanted the lie because the lie was safe. The lie kept the money flowing. The lie kept the investors happy and the sharks away. She thought she could negotiate. She thought this was a hostage situation where she could promise good behavior in exchange for my silence. But she did not understand. I was not here to negotiate. I was here to foreclose. I smiled at her. It was a smile that did not reach my eyes. I reached for the bottle of wine, the fake Chateau Margaux. I poured a glass for myself, filling it to the brim. I lifted the glass. "Ruin it." I whispered back to her, my voice calm and terrifying. "Honey, I drank the wine. It tasted like vinegar and betrayal." I set the glass down hard. I am just getting started. I did not sit down. Sitting implies I was joining the party. Sitting implies I was a guest. I was not a guest. I was the landlord serving an eviction notice. I turned away from the table, leaving Madison trembling in her wine-stained dress. I walked toward the small raised platform where the three-piece jazz band was playing a soft, inoffensive tune. The saxophone player saw me coming. He saw the look in my eyes and the way I carried myself. He stopped playing mid-note. The bassist followed suit. The drummer froze his sticks in the air. The silence in the room deepened. It was heavy and suffocating, like the air before a tornado touches down. I reached out and took the vintage microphone from the stand. It was heavy chrome cold against my palm. I tapped it once. The sound echoed through the speakers, a sharp thud that made half the room flinch. I looked out at the sea of faces, the Buofferts, the investors, the hangers-on, and my daughter. My daughter told me I should not come here. I began. My voice was amplified, filling every corner of the room, bouncing off the gilded mirrors. She sent me an email at 3:00 in the morning. She said, "Dad, do not come. You do not speak French. You will not understand the culture. You will embarrass me." I paused. I let that sink in. I saw Madison close her eyes, tears leaking out. She knew what was coming. She knew there was no stopping it. She was right, I continued. I do not speak French. I do not know the difference between a Bordeaux and a Burgundy. I do not know which fork is for the salad and which is for the fish. I am an ignorant American builder. I took a step closer to the edge of the stage, but there are two languages I speak fluently better than anyone in this room. I waited. The tension was so tight it felt like a wire about to snap. I speak money and I speak truth. And tonight we are going to have a conversation in both. I reached into the inside pocket of my tuxedo jacket. I pulled out the manila envelope Pierre had given me, the one containing the financial autopsy of the Beaufort family. I walked back to the table. I did not hand the envelope to Jean-Luc. I did not hand it to his mother. I tossed it. It spun through the air and landed with a heavy slap right in the center of the table, knocking over a crystal water pitcher. The water spilled, spreading across the tablecloth, joining the wine stain. "You call yourselves aristocracy," I said, my voice hard as steel. "You call yourselves the Beauforts of Léon, a noble family, a legacy." I pointed a finger at Madame Beaufort. She recoiled as if I had pointed a gun at her. "You are Marie Beaufort, former shift supervisor at a textile mill. You have 3 judgments against you for unpaid rent. You are not a countess. You are a squatter." The room gasped a collective intake of breath. The investors, the people who had given their life savings to these frauds, started to murmur. They looked at each other, confusion turning into suspicion. "And you," I said, turning my gaze to Jean-Luc. The Count, the businessman. Jean-Luc was gripping the table, his knuckles white. He looked like he wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't work. "You are an unemployed insurance salesman who got fired for stealing from the petty cash drawer. But that is not your biggest problem, is it, Jean-Luc?" I walked around the table until I was standing right behind him. I leaned down. "Your biggest problem is the $200,000 you owe to the casinos in Monaco. That is a lot of roulette wheels, son. That is a lot of bad bets." Jean-Luc flinched. He looked at the investors, terrified. He knew that debt was the only reason they were still breathing down his neck. I straightened up and addressed the room again. "This wedding," I said, gesturing to the decorations, the flowers, the opulence. "This is not a celebration of love. This is a fundraising event. My daughter told me she needed $50,000 for flowers. There are no $50,000 flowers. That money was going straight to a loan shark to keep Jean-Luc's knees intact." One of the investors, a man with gray hair and a kind face, stood up. His name was Monsieur Dubois, the retired teacher Pierre had mentioned. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Is the money gone?" I looked him in the eye. "It is gone," I said. "The tech startup does not exist. The dividends do not exist. Your money went into a slot machine, and it did not come back out. Pandemonium broke out. The investors surged forward, shouting at Jean-Luc, demanding answers. Madame Bouffe started screaming in French, calling me a liar, calling me a devil. Jean-Luc was shaking his head frantically, trying to deny it, trying to salvage the con, but the papers were right there on the table. The evidence was undeniable. I watched them turn on each other. The rats were eating the rats. But I was not done. I had exposed the groom. Now I had to expose the bride. I turned to Madison. She was still sitting there, frozen in her chair. She looked small. She looked like a child caught playing dress up in her mother's clothes. But she was not a child. She was a 28-year-old woman who had tried to steal my identity. "And you, Madison?" I said softly. The microphone picked up the drop in my volume, making it sound intimate and terrifying. "You told them I was dead." The room quieted down again. The drama of the money was one thing. The drama of the grave was another. "You told them I was a distinguished diplomat." I continued walking toward her. "You told them I died of a heart attack. You told them you were an AEs living off a trust fund." I stood over her. "Look at me, Madison." She looked up. Her eyes were red, rimmed, terrified. "I am not a diplomat," I said. My voice was thick with emotion, now the anger mixing with the grief of a father losing his child. "I am Harrison Cole. I pour concrete. I frame houses. I wake up at 4 a.m. and I come home with dust in my lungs and aches in my joints. I built my business brick by brick. I have calluses on my hands that you have never touched because you were too ashamed of them." I held up my hands, palms out, so everyone could see. They were rough, scarred hands, the hands of a worker. "These hands paid for your private school," I said. "These hands paid for your university. These hands paid for that dress you are wearing. That Vera Wang custom gown that cost $25,000. I paid for it with sweat, with labor, with my life." I lowered my hands. "But you were ashamed of that. You wanted a fairy tale. You wanted a dead hero instead of a living father. Because a dead father cannot check your bank statements. A dead father cannot stop you from robbing him." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I held it up. "I saw the fraud alert, Madison. I saw you try to access my accounts this afternoon. I saw you try to use my social security number to reset my password." Madison sobbed a choked, ugly sound. "I did not have a choice," she whispered. "They were going to hurt him. You always have a choice," I said. "You chose to steal. You chose to lie. You chose him over me." I put the phone away. "So here is the new reality," I said. My voice was cold now, devoid of any warmth. It was the voice of a man closing a ledger. "I canceled the payments, all of them. The chateau is not paid for. The catering is not paid for. This dinner is the last thing I am paying for." I looked at Jean-Luc and his mother. "You wanted a doughy. You wanted a payout. Well, here it is. 0. I made a 0 sign with my hand. No trust fund, no inheritance, no monthly allowance. The Bank of Harrison Cole is closed permanently. Jean-Luc looked at me. Then he looked at Madison. His eyes were wide with shock. The calculation was happening behind his eyes. He ran the numbers. He realized the variable he had counted on the rich American father was a negative integer. But she said, Jean-Luc stammered. She said, "You left her $10 million. She said the trust fund unlocked on the wedding day. I laughed. It was a dark sound. $10 million, I repeated. "Son, I have done well for myself. But I am a contractor from Chicago, not a Saudi prince. There is no $10 million. There never was." Madison made it up. She sold you a fantasy just like you sold her one. I looked at Madison. "You conned a con man, honey." I said, "I guess you did learn something from me after all. You learned how to sell a blueprint before the building was up." Jean-Luc stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. His face was red, flushed with a mix of humiliation and fury. He was realizing that his escape plan, his golden ticket out of debt, his safety from the loan sharks, had just evaporated into thin air. He looked at Madison. The look of adoration, the look of love. The look he had worn when they walked in was gone. In its place was pure, unadulterated hatred. "You lied to me," he screamed, his voice cracked. Madison stood up, reaching for him. "Jean-Luc, please," she begged. "We can figure this out. My dad. He is just angry. He has money. We can—" She did not finish the sentence. Jean-Luc's hand moved faster than I expected. The slap echoed through the room, louder than the microphone drop, louder than the shattered glass. It was a vicious, backhanded strike that caught Madison across the cheek. The force of it knocked her back into her chair. She gasped, clutching her face, staring at him in shock. "You stupid bitch!" Jean-Luc screamed, standing over her. "You told me 10 million. You told me it was guaranteed." The room erupted. Pierre was on his feet, moving toward the table, but I held up a hand to stop him. I needed her to see this. I needed her to feel it. Jean-Luc was not done. He grabbed the tablecloth and yanked it. Plates, glasses, silverware, and the flower arrangements crashed to the floor in a cacophony of destruction. 10 million, he roared, saliva flying from his mouth. "I have people coming for me. Real people, dangerous people. And you bring me a bricklayer." He pointed at me, spitting on the floor. "A bricklayer with empty pockets." Madison was crying, huddled in her chair, the red mark on her cheek growing brighter by the second. She looked at Jean-Luc, then she looked at me. She was waiting for me to step in. She was waiting for her father, the protector, the man who fixed everything, to charge in and knock him out. She was waiting for the rescue, but I stood still. I watched the man she had chosen, the man she had lied for, the man she was willing to send me to jail for, show her exactly who he was. This was the lesson. This was the payoff. "You lied to me," Jean-Luc shouted again, looming over her. "You are nothing. You are a fraud just like your father." I stepped forward then, just one step enough to draw his attention. "Be careful, son," I said, my voice low. "I may be a bricklayer, but I have buried things a lot heavier than you in a foundation." Jean-Luc looked at me. He saw the size of my shoulders. He saw the calluses on my hands. He saw 50 years of hard labor staring back at him. He backed down. He looked around the room at the angry investors, at the ruined dinner, at the woman he had just hit. He realized he had lost. He spat on the floor one last time near Madison's feet. "We are finished," he hissed at her. He turned and stormed toward the door, pushing past the stunned waiters. Madame Beaufort scrambled after him, clutching her fake diamond necklace, cursing in French. The door swung shut behind them. Silence returned to the room. But this time it was different. It was the silence of a battlefield after the shooting stops. Madison sat alone at the ruined table, the wine stain on her dress, the red mark on her face, the shattered glass around her feet. She looked up at me. "Dad," she whispered. I looked at her. I felt the immense sadness wash over me, but it was not the sadness of regret. It was the sadness of grief. I was grieving the daughter I thought I had. I did not go to her. I did not hug her. I turned to the investors. "I am sorry for your loss," I said to them. "I truly am. But the money is gone. Do not look for it here." Then I turned and walked toward the exit. Pierre fell in step beside me. "Where are you going, Harrison?" he asked softly. "I am going to get a burger," I said. "I am starving." "But what about her?" Pierre asked, gesturing back at Madison, who was now sobbing into her hands. I stopped at the door. I looked back one last time. "She is in the rubble now, Pierre," I said. "Let her dig herself out. It is the only way she will learn how to build something real." I pushed the doors open and walked out into the Paris night. The air was cool and crisp. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 24 hours, I could breathe. The demolition was complete. Now we would see if anything could be salvaged from the wreckage. The silence in the restaurant did not last long because it was broken by the sound of reality rushing back in as Jean-Luc stormed out. But his mother, Marie Beaufort, lingered for a moment, just long enough to grab 2 unopened bottles of the fake Chateau Margaux from the serving table and shoved them into her oversized handbag, her eyes darting around like a cornered rat. She looked at Madison, who was still weeping in the chair, and spat a stream of rapid-fire French at her. And I did not need a translator to understand the venom because she called her a fool. She called her a peasant. She called her a waste of time before she turned and ran after her son, leaving my daughter sitting in the wreckage of her own ambition. The investors were filing out now, and they walked past Madison without looking at her because they were already on their phones calling lawyers and calling the police trying to salvage what was left of their savings, knowing they were victims too. But they had learned a hard lesson that night. I stood by the kitchen door with Michelle, and the staff was waiting, hovering by the walls, unsure of what to do with the half-eaten appetizers and the shattered glass, because it was a scene of absolute devastation. A banquet hall turned into a crime scene. Michelle looked at me, his face pale, and asked, "Miss Cole, do we continue the service?" I looked at the table, and I looked at the empty chairs where the fake aristocrats had sat. And I looked at Madison, who was staring at the tablecloth, tracing the stain of the red wine, with a shaking finger, looking lost and broken, but still sitting there as if waiting for the next course. As if she thought that if she just stayed seated long enough, the movie would rewind and the happy ending would play out. She needed to wake up. "No, Michelle," I said, my voice flat. "The party is over. Clear the table." Michelle snapped his fingers and ordered his staff to clear everything immediately. The waiters moved in with efficient brutality, and they did not ask if she was finished. They reached over her, snatching plates and glasses, stripping the silverware, and rolling up the tablecloths, bundling the expensive centerpieces into trash bags. It was the sound of a dream being dismantled with every clatter and crash and thud. Madison flinched with every noise and looked up, blinking, as the waiters took the bread basket from under her nose. "Dad." She croaked, her voice small and terrified. "Tell them to stop. We can still eat." I shook my head and told her there is nothing to eat. "Madison, the kitchen is closed." I turned and walked out the door into the cool Paris night, where Pierre was waiting by the curb, smoking a cigarette, and he nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement of a job done. I walked toward the taxi stand, feeling exhausted, my bones heavy, just wanting to go back to my hotel, take off this tuxedo, and sleep for a week. But I heard the click of heels on the pavement behind me, fast, frantic steps. "Dad, wait!" she screamed. I stopped, but I did not turn around immediately because I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the city air, steeling myself, knowing the demolition was over. But the cleanup was just beginning. I turned and Madison was running toward me, looking like a specter, her hair falling out of the chignon, her mascara running down her face in black streaks, the wine stain on her dress looking like a wound in the streetlights, as she shivered in the night air, hugging her bare arms. She stopped a few feet from me, panting, and screamed, "You ruined it!" The sadness I had felt inside the restaurant evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard stone in my stomach, because she still did not get it even after being slapped by her fiancé and insulted by her future mother-in-law and exposed as a fraud. Her first reaction was to blame me. "I ruined it," I repeated calmly. "Madison Harwan just saved you from a federal indictment. I just saved you from marrying a man who would have sold you to pay off a gambling debt. We were in love," she wailed, stomping her foot like a child. "We were going to build an empire. He had a plan, Dad. You just had to give us the seed money. You have so much. You are sitting on millions, and you let your only daughter suffer. You are selfish. You are cruel." I looked at her and saw the delusion in her eyes, deep and rooted in years of getting everything she wanted without working for it. I stepped closer to her and said, "I am not selfish. I am a father, and a father does not let his daughter marry a con man. A father does not let his daughter steal from him." "I did not steal," she argued. "I was borrowing it. I was going to pay you back when the trust fund unlocked." "There is no trust fund, Madison." I shouted, my voice echoing off the stone buildings. "There never was. That was a lie you told them. And then you started believing it yourself. That is the sickness here. Yet you lied so much you forgot what was real." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, and whispered, "But you have money. You could have just paid them. You could have let us be happy." Happiness built on a lie is not happiness. I said, "It is a time bomb, and I just diffused it." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out a plain white envelope that was not thick, containing only 2 pieces of paper. I held it out to her and said, "Here." She looked at the envelope, and her eyes lit up with a flicker of hope, thinking it was a check, thinking I had broken Shingy, that after all the screaming and the drama, Daddy was finally paying the bill. She snatched it from my hand and ripped it open, pulling out the papers. The first was a boarding pass for Air France Flight 420 to Chicago. "Oh, hair departing at 7 in the morning tomorrow. Economy CL class seat 32B, a middle seat." The second paper was a printout from my bank confirming an account closure. She stared at them confused and asked, "What is this?" "Where is the money?" "There is no money." I said, "The ticket is your way home. It is a middle seat. It is non-refundable. And that letter is a notification that I have canceled your supplementary credit card, and I have also called the landlord of your apartment in Chicago. The lease is terminated. Effective the first of the month, I am selling the furniture to cover the breaking fee." She looked up at me, horror dawning on her face, and whispered, "You are cutting me off? I am setting you free." I corrected her. "You wanted to be independent. You wanted to be a big shot. Well, here is your chance." I pointed to the ticket and said, "You have 2 choices, Madison. Option A. You get on that plane tomorrow morning. You fly back to Chicago. You move into a studio apartment that you pay for. You get a job, a real job, waitress, receptionist. I do not care. You work. You pay your own bills. You start from zero. And maybe in a few years, when you have learned what $1 is actually worth, we can have dinner." She shook her head, tears flying, and asked, "What about option B?" "A portion B?" I said, gesturing to the streets of Paris behind her. "You stay here. You stay with your count. You help him pay off his $200,000 debt. You explain to the police why you were selling shares in a fake company. You figure it out without me, without my money, without my name." "I cannot go back to Chicago," she sobbed. "I told everyone I was moving to Paris to live in a castle. They will laugh at me. I will be a joke." "You are already a joke, Madison," I said brutally. "The only question is whether you want to be a joke with a future or a tragedy with a prison sentence." She crumpled the papers in her hand and screamed, "I hate you. I hate you so much. I know," I said. "And I can live with that because I love you enough to let you hate me." I turned away and walked toward the waiting taxi that Pierre had hailed, and I opened the door. "Dad, wait." She screamed, running a few steps after me. "You cannot leave me here. I have no money for a hotel. I have nowhere to go." I paused with my hand on the door handle and said without looking back, "The airport is open 24 hours. The train costs $10. I suggest you start walking." I got into the car, and Pierre slammed the door shut, and I told the driver to drive. As the car pulled away, I looked out the rear window and saw Madison standing on the sidewalk under the yellow glow of the street lamp, screaming something I could not hear as she threw the envelope on the ground. Then, immediately fell to her knees and scrambled to pick up the ticket. She was broken and humiliated and alone. It was the hardest thing I had ever done because leaving my child on a street corner in a foreign country felt like a violation of nature. But as I watched her figure recede into the distance, I felt hope because for the first time in her life, she had a problem she could not buy her way out of. And she had to make a choice that had real consequences. She had the ticket. She had the way home now. She just had to decide if she was humble enough to take it. 6 months have passed since I left my daughter screaming on a sidewalk in Paris, and the Chicago autumn has settled in with a crisp chill that usually makes my old joints ache. But this year I feel lighter than I have in decades. I am sitting on the back porch of a bungalow in the suburbs, a modest brick house I bought 3 months ago after selling the apartment in the city, because I needed to get away from the ghosts of the past and get back to what I know, which is fixing things with my hands. The garden was a mess when I moved in, overrun with weeds and broken trellises, but I have spent every weekend out here pulling and planting and rebuilding. It is good work. It is honest work. Sarah is sitting in the wicker chair next to me, drinking iced tea and reading a book. We are not dating exactly, but we are spending a lot of time together. And it turns out that having a companion who values you for your company and not your credit limit is a very peaceful way to live. She looks up at me and smiles and asks if I am nervous. I wipe the dirt from my hands and tell her I am not nervous because I have nothing left to lose. I hear the sound of a car engine in the driveway. It is not a limousine. It is not a luxury sedan. It is a 10-year-old Toyota with a dent in the bumper and a muffler that needs work. I stand up and walk to the gate. Madison steps out of the car. She looks different. The Madison who went to Paris was polished to a high shine, covered in labels, fake tan, and hair extensions. The woman standing in my driveway is wearing jeans that are worn at the knees, a gray sweater and sneakers. Her hair is tied back in a messy bun, and she is not wearing makeup. She looks tired. She has dark circles under her eyes, and her hands are chapped. She looks beautiful. She looks like a real person. She walks up the driveway slowly carrying a brown paper grocery bag. She stops a few feet away from me. She does not try to hug me. She does not try to charm me. She just stands there and lets me look at her. "Hi, Dad," she says. Her voice is quiet. "Hi, Madison," I say. She shifts her weight from one foot to the other. "I brought you these," she says, holding out the bag. "I saw them at the market, and I remembered you used to like them when I was a kid." I take the bag and look inside. It is full of oranges. Florida navels. When she was 5 years old, we used to sit on the porch of our old house and peel oranges together and see who could get the peel off in one long strip. It was our game. It was a memory I thought she had deleted along with my existence as her father. "Thank you," I say. "Come sit down." We walk to the porch. She nods at Sarah, who smiles and excuses herself to go inside, giving us space. Madison sits in the empty chair. She looks around the garden. "You did a good job with the hydrangeas," she says. "They look healthy." "I used a new fertilizer," I say, "and I fixed the drainage." We sit in silence for a moment. It is not the comfortable silence of old friends, but it is not the hostile silence of enemies either. It is the silence of two people testing the ice to see if it will hold. "I heard you are working," I say. She nods. "Yeah, I am a shift manager at a diner on the west side. It is not glamorous. I spend 8 hours a day on my feet dealing with customers who complain that their eggs are too cold or their coffee is too weak. My back hurts every night. Good, I say." She laughs a short, dry sound. "Yeah, it is good. I mean, it is terrible, but it is good. I paid off the first credit card last week using my own money I earned." I look at her hands. Her fingernails are short and unpainted. "And the apartment I asked gone," she says. "I sold the furniture to cover the lease break fee, like you said." I am renting a studio apartment near the diner. It is the size of a shoebox, and the radiator clanks all night, but the rent is paid through next month. She looks down at her sneakers. Jean-Luc called me, she says softly. A month ago, he said he found a new investor. He wanted me to come back. He said we could try again. I feel a spike of tension in my chest. And I told him to go to hell, she says, looking up at me. I told him I am done with fantasies. I told him I would rather serve pancakes for the rest of my life than spend one more minute pretending to be someone I am not. I let out a breath. The tension releases. I am proud of you, Madison, I say. Her eyes fill with tears. She tries to blink them back, but one escapes and rolls down her cheek. Dad, she says, her voice trembling. I am so sorry. I know I said it before, but I mean it now. I am sorry I lied about you. I am sorry I said you were dead. I was so ashamed of where I came from because I felt small inside. I thought if I painted over my life with gold paint, nobody would see the cracks. But I just ended up rotting from the inside out. She reaches for an orange from the bag and starts to peel it. Her hands are shaking slightly. You were right to leave me there, she says. If you had bailed me out, I would still be lying. I would still be drowning. The ticket home was the hardest thing anyone has ever given me, but it was the only thing that could have saved me. She hands me a segment of the orange. I take it and eat it. It is sweet and tart. I am not going to pay your debts, Madison, I say. I am not going to buy you a house. I am not going to make it easy for you. I know, she says. I do not want you to. I want to do it myself. But maybe sometime we could just have dinner. Not at a fancy place just here or at my place. I make a pretty good grilled cheese now. I smile. I would like that, I say. We sit there for a long time peeling oranges and watching the sun go down. We talk about small things, the weather, the cubs, the way the leaves are turning color. We do not talk about the money or the wedding or the humiliation. We have already said everything that needed to be said about that. Now we are just laying one brick at a time. Sarah comes back out with a tray of sandwiches. Madison stands up and helps her set the table. I watch them interacting. There is respect there. Madison is helping not because she wants something, but because she is a guest, and that is what you do. Later, after Madison leaves driving away in her beat-up car to go to her small apartment and her hard job, I stay on the porch. Sarah sits next to me and takes my hand. You did good, Harrison, she says. I look at the empty orange peels on the table. You know, Sarah, I say, I lost $150,000 on that wedding. The deposit on the chateau, the cancellations, the flights, the fees, it is gone. I burned it. Does it bother you? She asks. I think about it. I think about the years of work that money represented. I think about the concrete I poured and the winters I endured to earn it. No, I say it does not bother me. I look at the driveway where my daughter just drove away, not as a princess, not as a fake A's, but as a woman with dignity and a job. That $150,000 was not a loss. I say it was an investment. It was the most expensive education I ever paid for, but it worked. It bought my daughter back. It bought her soul back from the pawn shop she had sold it to. I look up at the sky. The stars are coming out over Chicago. The same stars that are shining over Paris, somewhere in France. Jean-Luc is probably running from a debt collector or looking for the next victim. He is still trapped in the lie, but we are free. Madison is free from the delusion, and I am free from the burden of being used. I squeeze Sarah's hand. I am ready for dinner, I say. We walk inside and I close the door, leaving the cold night behind. The house is warm. It smells of oranges and old wood. It feels like a home. And for the first time in a very long time, I know that everything is going to be okay because the foundation is solid again. And on a solid foundation, you can build anything. I learned the hard way that you cannot buy character, and you certainly cannot buy respect. For years, I thought being a good father meant removing every obstacle from my daughter's path. But I was wrong. By giving her everything, I robbed her of the struggle that builds true strength. When I cut the financial cord, I thought I was losing her forever, but I was actually saving her life. True love isn't about enabling comfortable lies. It is about having the courage to force the painful truth. The best inheritance I can leave Madison isn't a trust fund or a title. It is the knowledge that she is strong enough to stand on her own 2 feet without my wallet as a crutch. If you think I did the right thing by canceling the wedding and forcing my daughter to start over, hit that like button and tell me in the comments if you would have forgiven her sooner.